Are we ready to go?
Give it just 1 second. Okay, I see us. We're good.
All right, we're going to start with a call to order for the design review special meeting, May 13th, 2020. And I'd like to start with a roll call. Guess our new commissioner, start off, please.
John Gray here.
Glenn,
Yes. Present.
Eugene.
Here. Can you hear me?
All right. Yep.
Okay.
And Patrick Collins. And so our first item is the adoption of the agenda. Can I have a motion to adopt, please?
I make a motion to adopt the agenda.
I'll second.
All right, all those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Patrick. Jonathan, call you out
Aye.
for a
Aye.
Glenn
Yes.
and
Aye.
Eugene.
Yes.
All right, awesome. Moving along. This is the public comment section for items that are not on the agenda this evening. And I guess, Sarah, we just wait to see if there's any public comments that are not on the agenda.
Correct. I will check the inbox now. I do not have any public comment not on the agenda.
All right, wonderful. And we have nothing for the consent calendar. So our next item is study session SS01-20. And Jonathan is our planner.
Thank you, Chair. The item before you tonight is SS0120. Applicant is Tony Valdez and the property owner is Peter Shattuck. It is a study session requesting the comments from the DRC on a conceptual plan for the future development of two properties in the east end of Lafayette. The two properties are 3458 Mount Diablo Boulevard and the adjacent property to the north, 1005 2nd Street. Both properties are near the intersection of Mount Diablo Boulevard and 2nd Street. The applicant proposes to demolish the existing commercial building at the Mount Diablo fronting property in order to construct approximately 4,300 square feet of commercial space and to construct 4 two-story for rent housing units, and also to subdivide the northern property on 2nd Street in order to construct 6 three-story for sale condominiums. Access would be from 2nd Street and it would be between both parcels, servicing both parcels. At this point in the project, the expected triggers for review and expected findings that future hearing bodies are to make is a demolition permit to demolish an existing building in downtown design review findings for the construction of a new building in downtown, a tentative map to subdivide the northern parcel to construct condominiums, a land use permit to consider a residential 3rd floor for a building in the C1 zoning district, and a land use permit to consider general retail sales in the C1 zoning district as well. So I just wanted to remind the commission and those listening that a study session is an informal review of a project. So no action will be taken tonight. It's just an opportunity for the DRC and the city to give direction to an applicant while they're still developing their project. The benefit is that the applicant is saved from time and resources spent on developing a project that is not in line with the city's vision for a particular area. So I look forward to the DRC's comments on the project, in addition to just looking at the general massing and architectural concept of the project. I'd ask that the DRC weigh in on 3 specific points. One is an opportunity to create more on-site parking. As proposed, the project does not comply with the parking requirement needed to service the retail space. So finding ways to accommodate on that on site as opposed to seeking an exemption would be preferred. Secondly, I'd ask the DRC to discuss opportunities for this corner lot, because the downtown design review guideline states that it's recommended that corner lots serve as an anchor and provide for larger, more attractive corner buildings to attract people to that intersection. And lastly, I'd ask the DRC to look at opportunities for the applicant to create private open space to facilitate community gathering. This has been done in other projects in the East End. I think most recently was the project at Brown Avenue, where they constructed a plaza adjacent to those buildings. It's an opportunity for those for community gathering, and also a good place to place public art in the future. So staff has not done a deep dive in analyzing this project against the required findings, but we look forward to your comments, and the applicant is also here for a presentation. Thank you.
Okay. Does anyone have any questions for Jonathan?
None.
Seeing none, we have an applicant. Welcome.
Hey, yes, thank you. I'll just make a brief presentation. And is it possible for me to share my screen? Is it that? Oh, here we go. Just bear with me while I muddle through this really quick. There we go. Okay, can you all see the screen?
Yes.
Okay, great. First of all, my name is Tony. I'm with Coast Architecture. I want to thank you all for hearing our project. We look forward to your comments, and I also want to give a thanks to Jonathan for setting up the Zoom meeting. It's much appreciated during these uncertain times we're in. Jonathan gave a pretty succinct overview of the project, and again, we're welcome all your feedback to help us pave a smooth path through entitlements. But as Jonathan mentioned, we have a mixed-use project which has about 4,000 square feet of retail fronting Mount Diablo, 4 rent residential units sort of behind those, kind of stacking up as you go back, from Mount Diablo, with outdoor space on the 3rd floor looking out over Mount Diablo. And then furthest to the north are the 6 for-sale townhome units. And I don't want to repeat what Jonathan just said, but I'll just kind of walk you through the logic of the project. One of the things we're thinking about is maintaining the street frontage on Mount Diablo, maintaining the retail frontage. So that's where we've located the 1-story retail frontage with signage and entrances fronting Mount Diablo, and addressing the Merrill Gardens project to the east. As you go further back, I'll just kind of walk you through these. As you go further north on the site, you'll see the tuck under parking that we're providing for the residential units, which have an internal staircase that take you up to the 3rd floor, leading out to that roof deck we were looking at. And then, of course, as we mentioned on the north end of the project, the 6 for-sale townhome units. This is a view from Mount Diablo. Here you see the kind of approach to the retail space, where we're providing a simple pared down design with a green roof to give some special identity to this user, but also to provide a nice view for the residences to the north, looking out over this building to the south. We'd be proposing, lush landscape. These are preliminary, so this would get filled in with, we'd bring on a landscape architect and fill this in with street frontage consistent with design guidelines. Here's a view from the south, as if you're standing at Merrill Gardens, looking at the project, and you really see kind of the cross section of the project where we have the retail portion fronting Mount Diablo, stepping back. We have the 50-foot setback on Mount Diablo. So as you step back, going up to the second and third levels where we have the 4 rental units with their outdoor space looking out over Mount Diablo to the south. And then of course, the site is sort of bisected by the vehicular entrance and exit. And then at the north end of the site, we have the for-sale townhome units. One thing to know is that we have an access easement on the north end of this property for the folks adjacent. So we kind of have the opportunity to make sort of an interior street, sort of an informal interior street. So this is the place where we think it makes sense to have, what's essentially a backyard to these townhomes with outdoor decks looking out over this kind of more quiet residential oriented view to the north. This is a view looking into the drive aisle with the townhomes on your right. To your left is the tuck under parking for the apartment buildings. Just showing how that circulation kind of works and some of the articulation of that those facades. These are some materials boards, what we're thinking about in terms of materials for the retail space in this slide. The building we're thinking is going to be smooth plaster with dark bronze and black articulation for the storefront and the awning. Raised planter beds consistent with the street frontage, and again we keep looking to the Merrill Gardens frontage because we think it's so successful in lots of ways. And then of course the green roof that you saw in those previous views. Housing materials, these are again very simple materials, what we're hoping to do interesting things with. Simple shiplap siding and dark shingle roofing, an idea about permeable paving for the drive aisle. Some of the detailing would be painted steel railings. And then of course, here's a view of the rooftop gardens. This is actually a view of the Merrill Gardens rooftop, which is one of our aspirations for the rooftops. And then of course, solar panels, which would come down the road with to sort of minimize our carbon footprint and bring us into compliance with the energy code. So I will, with that, I'll stop sharing my screen. And I, again, appreciate any preliminary feedback. Yeah, we're excited about getting this project moving forward.
Gonna unmute myself there.
Yeah.
This is study session, so it's informal. We're just going to talk to you about what we kind of feel. I guess before we start, does anyone have any questions specific? Well, we can just go through it. Glenn, you want to start?
Sure, I'll start. To answer Jonathan's thing, his 3 things for the commissioners to look at. I actually don't have a good answer for any of those. Okay. I do think that it's problematic to have no retail parking. It's not the most congested area in the city, although it's become increasingly congested since the police department moved there, because the police department takes up a lot of the metered spaces. So I think that, and it's across the street from McDonald's. I think it definitely needs some retail parking, and I'm not sure how to work that into the full site that you have developed at this point in time. Opportunities for the corner. I think as you design it, actually, I sort of like the idea of the retail space that's not rectangular. And I think the flaring out of that facade gives you an opportunity to work with planners and other things or artwork and work in a little bit more interest in the corner. But I actually see the way that it's awning and signaged is that it does direct the public to the corner. I do encourage you to, and Jonathan may be able to help you. I do encourage you to look at the Brown Street property that was developed.
Mhm.
They made good use of the corner. It sort of was an open space. It became part of their retention for water runoff, and there's benches there and some garden stuff. And I encourage you to look at that. One of the things also about the Brown property is that one of the things I don't particularly like on your design is that everything is monolithic. So when I look at the condominiums, one looks like the next, like the next, like the next, even though the corner one has a little bit, the bump out, you know, in articulation, but the articulation is very minimal, very, very minimal. And I don't think, I think if you look at, again, Brown, you'll see is that they took the townhouses and by changing materials, there wasn't a lot of articulation, but they were able to introduce a lot of different appearance in the mass by changing the materials, colors, and so on and so forth. So I really encourage you to look at something beyond one color scheme that you have there and a monolithic design. Not really in favor of the entry to the driveway with the address on it, which is a little confusing because actually that would appear to be the address of the retail store. And if you don't provide any parking there, so the only reason to have a signage for is if people thought this is where I have to park for the retail. There's no reason to have signage there for the apartment units. I don't know if you're trying to take that address for the apartment units because they're actually fronted on, well, at least the one is a property that's on 2nd Street. So I'm not very much for that. I think conceptually the roof garden is a good idea, like Merrill across the street. Okay, again, conceptually, you've sort of indicated where things would be. Obviously, if you look at designs that we approve, we don't go with monolithic schemes where shrub, straight in a line.
Right.
Okay, so your landscape architect will have to do work on that. Paving and the pavers, permeable pavers, they were good on the garage access. Again, the rooftop really provides, it appears at this point in time, it's a rooftop garden. I'm not sure if it's accessed by anybody. Okay, I mean, I'm not sure, I can't see how it's accessed by the apartment buildings, and it definitely isn't accessed by the condominiums. And I believe the city's policy is 20% open area. So I'm not sure that that rooftop garden is doing much for the condominium people. And you said you had some availability on the north side of the property. Now, maybe I misunderstood that you were looking at a driveway, or I'd be looking at that open space as something to enhance landscaping or whatever for the condominium side development. And that's pretty much my comments.
All right, Eugene, you want to take a crack at it?
Sure. Thank you, Patrick. I have some of the similar comments to Glenn previously articulated in his discourse of this. I wanted to, first of all, say that in the future, when the architect comes before us, I would like them to bring forth more contextual documentation. When I say context, I'm talking about a couple more blocks or even 1 or 2 blocks side by side with the frontality of that signage, the commercial building that you're proposing, so we can calibrate the language you're trying to instill here, as well as the massing, the fenestration, and materiality to be in keeping with our overall intent to make that El Camino corridor something kind of unique and worthwhile for a city. So I would look at that, number one. So in the future, please provide more context, documentation, and straight on elevation with additional profile of the adjacent blocks would be good to go. The other comment I have is that I would like the architect and the design team to show us a variety of options that you are looking at, so that during the study session in particular, it would have been helpful today if we could have maybe seen what you came up with to come to this sort of a milestone chart to bring forth for us this presentation of this particular party. I see right now, when I see this, that your strategy was to create, like you said, commercial activation on the street, but it is a shorter building. And I don't know, I forgot how the other buildings are in the area, but it is a street now, and it is an opportunity to we're not talking about like city, like San Francisco, but slightly further densification. So there's action and activity about it. Therefore, when you densify that El Camino corridor, you're able to then capture some additional open area about between the other edge, which is the condominium that you're proposing, that in the middle ground could be the area that you could further develop for us. Like, you could tell us the constraints by doing these studies, but today, unfortunately, we're only seeing one scheme, and it shows you the 3 layers coming from that El Camino, from a commercial strip to the rental unit strip, to a sort of a driveway strip, and then to the condominium strip, if I could just say that way. And so I would appreciate if we were to do additional study session or review your application in the future, please show us how you got to this scheme and show us the evidence of what constraints you had when you looked at different parties. Okay, so that's that. And then going to the staff's 3 bullet items. So I think I alluded to the fact that by densifying the edges, both the frontality area of the El Camino, the Mount Diablo Boulevard, and then the other far end where you right now are positioning the condominiums or townhouses. In the mid-ground, you could capture some parking and additional open space perhaps. So that's where I would go and look at. And then on the corner that you have right now, I would like to also see some other ways that you could develop that corner, because I think corners are important to our city from looking at the overall character of the Mount Diablo. And usually we have more pronounced vertical pavilions, vertical towers. Sometimes there's a gap, sometimes there's a plaza, like in that Brown project that Glenn alluded to. And I would highly recommend, similar to what Commissioner Cass has mentioned, that take a look at that previous precedent that we have in our city. And then I think that's it. So I think that is my comment for tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Eugene. John, do you want to take a crack at this?
Sure. I am in general agreement with the comments by Commissioner Cass and Commissioner Sim. I would like to especially see other ideas at developing the corner at Mount Diablo and 2nd Street. I think that we all support the idea of strengthening corners in one way or another. The building opposite this, across 2nd Street, is a building with strong presence. The where the Vitality Bowls is that the Merrill Gardens property?
Yes.
It's 2-story, it's brick, it looks very substantial. I understand this is a very early stage in design, and I appreciate this as an idea of zoning the property and how that works. But right now at its level of development, I would say it has a very hard-edged look about it. And I would ask that as you develop it, you look at softening it, at increasing textures and rhythms to be more in character with what our downtown plan is kind of going for. You know, I think there's plenty of room for that. As far as you know, the specific questions Jonathan offered us, I mean, if there is a way to get parking in that middle zone where the rental units are, if there's a way to push in some space there, perhaps. I would agree we want to try to get retail parking on the site. As for the open space, you know, it's interesting to me. I actually would like to hear your thoughts on where the building kind of angles back away from Mount Diablo at the west side of the property. And I wonder what your thought is there and whether that's an opportunity for some public relief space, you know, seating or depending on what's compatible with the retail. So I'd be interested to hear your thoughts on why you've chosen to do that. And finally, I would echo a comment I believe Commissioner Sim made regarding the variety of the facade. I mean, I'm not positive, maybe it was Commissioner Katz. That not only are the building elements completely repetitive, but the condo facade that faces 2nd Street on the north side of the property is, I would say, a fairly forbidding facade. And even though there may not be programmatic reasons for a lot of windows, I think I would ask you to look at what could be done to that facade to make it a bit more friendly as a pedestrian facing facade on 2nd Street. And
Thanks.
I think that's what I would offer. Thank you.
Thanks, John. All right, I'm not going to just restate everything. I don't really disagree with anything that's been said. I really feel we got to figure out a way to get public parking, because I think that area is really in need of more, not less parking. And if you're drawing in retail, you're going to definitely need something. So absolutely agree with that. Activating the corner, it's a rectangular corner on that edge doesn't work for me, but that's already been said. I think you should look at some activation of the roof, which it's not accessible. I mean, it's got that green little perimeter, but it seems to be a great place. You know, it'd certainly make the rental units more appealing if they were able to walk out onto a deck. I really don't like the signage on the side. I see these as 3 different structures, and the first structure, the retail structure in the front, is very dissimilar from the other 2, but the other 2 are tied together, even though they're really kind of different uses. And that bar across the top link them together, and I think it'd be better if it wasn't. Like, one's a set of condos that you're selling, one's a set of rentals, which is associated with the retail area. Take that bar out and kind of, I think Commissioner Gray was commenting to see, you know, dissimilarity. They're too similar, and I certainly agree and want to reinforce the comment that the condo east wall there, that's a pedestrian. We want to activate that pedestrian area, and that 3-story straight up wall, it needs to have a little bit more welcoming feel to it. So I don't dislike the design. I think it's a good use of that corner. My wife has been asking me about that space for years now, like, what is going on there? So it's nice to see that something's going on there, and I think you're heading in the right direction. So like we said, this is a study session, so there is no formal. Do you have any questions for us, or any questions about any of our comments?
Yeah, I want to tell you all thank you. I appreciate the comments, all of them. One sort of, and if I maybe could have presented another option, but one scheme we were studying before we landed on the sort of townhouse scheme, so to speak, was actually a podium scheme, which created a half subterranean level at the ground plane, but which would provide more parking and provide more parking for retail in particular. But it was decided that for such a relatively small site, it didn't make as much sense to go to that sort of formula where we have a concrete podium with 2 layers with only being able to build up 2 levels with wood frame. And so we sort of landed on this idea of these sort of disparate pieces, which I think could still work. But I'm interested to hear from the DRC what you think about an idea of a podium scheme.
Eugene, John, Glenn?
Yeah, sure. Well, I can start. I wouldn't know how to comment until you showed it to us,
Sure.
because then if you did show it to us, we could then understand with constructive comments to evaluate it. That
Sure.
would be my comment. I would be interested in seeing it because you are in a parking shortfall, and I think all the commissioners have shared that concern tonight. And by compacting your building, there might be some advantage to doing some of the moves that we are suggesting to soften up the edges and that East Avenue in particular with some more moves about it. And right now it looks like fragmented play of 3 elements, right? And I think the chair also alluded to that. You have a very clear area of apartments and then condos, and condos look similar. And then you have the commercial. So by doing something like that, there might be some possibility. So to keep this short, show us, and then we can evaluate that. Thank you.
Glenn?
Yeah, I think subterranean parking, would be a solution, definitely a solution on solving some of the retail. And actually, it would solve also some of the open space problems as well, because once you're under the podium, it allows you to develop that open space areas.
John, do you have anything to add?
I would agree. It's a small site to do a podium development. And I sort of would agree with Commissioner Sim that it's a little hard to evaluate it just in concept without
Sure.
looking at ideas. Yeah, I mean, the arrival sequence for the residents, driving into a dark parking structure might be a drawback. On the other hand, the idea of a second level podium space might be nicer to look out on when you're in the homes than looking down to a lower level driveway. So I think it, you know how you might have what you thought was working and what wasn't. I would say that I see there could be some challenges there, but I would be interested to see your thoughts.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I don't have a lot to add to that. I would have probably said that the site is a little small to do subterranean parking, and that comes with its own issues. So I think for me, you're on the right track. I just think you take the comments that we've given you and keep going in that direction.
Mm-hmm.
Although if you want to show us something else, we're certainly happy to see it.
Sure. Thank you.
All righty. Well, thank you for coming in, and we'll look forward to seeing the next thing.
Great. Thank you.
All right.
you.
Next item. Jumping back to my is item 7A, signs S02-20, and Jonathan is our planner.
All right, thank you, Chair. The next item before you tonight is sign permit 0220. Applicant is Sam Schritten, and the property owner is Las Trampas Pool LLC. It is a sign permit requesting to install a new freestanding sign at the corner of St. Mary's Road and Glenside Drive. At 4 feet 11 inches and 12.5 square feet. The freestanding sign's main purpose is to identify the business at that site, Las Trancas Swim Club. The property is an unaddressed parcel at the corner of St. Mary's Road and Glenside Drive. It's fairly large for the district. The existing use is an existing non-conforming use as a private swimming facility in a residential zoning district. And the facility is set back about 150 feet away from Glenside Drive. And this freestanding sign is used to identify the business and draw clients to it. Staff has reviewed the application against the required freestanding sign development standards and finds that the project is compliant. Specifically, the project at 4 feet 11 inches is within the 8 feet threshold maximum for freestanding signs. At 12.5 square feet is well within the 25 square foot threshold for maximum area. It's proposed within a landscape planter, which is required. And staff finds that in this case, a freestanding sign is warranted given that the business frontage for Las Trancas Swim Club is set back significantly from Glenside Drive. Staff has also made the required findings for a sign permit against the criteria for design review for signs. That's included in the staff report, and I'm happy to answer any questions about that. The sign was noticed to all neighbors within 300 feet of the subject property, and no comments were received for inclusion in the staff report, but several comments were received after publication of the staff report. Those comments were emailed to the commission ahead of the meeting, and I'll just summarize a couple of them that were received. Rand Shritton, the property owner at 3227 Sweet Drive, submitted a letter supporting the sign with its limited height and non-illumination. Ryan Siamis, a Lafayette homeowner, found the sign too colorful. He also recommends placing the sign closer to the public trail and the church. Those were comments received after publication of the staff report. And we received comments from Bill Hagovic, property owner at 3251 Woodview Drive, but he has submitted comments that we'll read into the record entirely during the public hearing, the public comment portion of the item. As I've said previously, staff has reviewed the proposed sign against the development standards for freestanding signs. It's in compliance. It's in compliance with those standards. Staff has made the required findings for approval for a sign and recommends that the DRC find the project exempt from CEQA and approve the project subject to conditions. Here for any questions. And the applicant is here to give a presentation.
Anybody have any questions? You're on mute. Yeah. Go ahead, go on. You're back. We got you.
Okay. Entrances to the parking lot, is it only on Glenside, or is there, I can't see from this photo, is there one also on St. Mary's Road?
No, it's just on Glenside, right
Okay.
there. Yeah.
Okay.
St. Mary's, yeah, there's no entrance on St. Mary's, so there's no signage for the pool. Thanks for hearing us, by the way. This is a Eagle Scout project. I'm also involved with the
Hold on, just a second, Sam.
yeah.
Before we jump to you, before you start, just want to make sure that none of the commissioners have any questions for planning. So, Klein, that answer your question?
Yes, it answered my question.
Eugene, do you have any question?
No questions.
John?
No questions for Jonathan.
All right, thank you. Now, Sam, it's your time to go. So welcome.
Sorry about that.
No problem.
So yeah, we I've been part of the pool as a kid growing up, and then 3 years ago, I moved across the street on St. Mary's and been involved with the operations role. Lance is my maintenance guy who's helped, has experience with the sign company that we're working with. And then what I was saying about the Troop 243 across the street, the Boy Scout troop, I'm an Eagle Scout from there. And then I've been involved since 2014. One of the older scouts is helping us as Eagle Scout project, actually digging the holes and helping us install the sign. There is no signage for Las Trampas. A lot of people drive past and don't really know it's a pool. So the drawings that Jonathan showed, it's 10 feet back and it's at a diagonal. Putting it over on Glenside, there's not really a lot of room to put it there. And I don't think the visibility would be as much from people that just drive along St. Mary's if we just put it on Glenside. So Lance, do you want to say anything about it?
Just that I completely agree. If it's on Glenside, it's just only people that drive down Glenside could see it. If it's on St. Mary's, you can see it coming from St. Mary's Road or from Glenside. It's very similar to other signs that are in Lafayette right now. When you pull into, yeah, Lafayette signs, other clubs and stuff like that. It's very similar.
All right. Thank you. Any of the commissioners have questions for the applicant?
Nope, not me, Eugene here.
All right.
I do have one question.
Go ahead, John.
So this is John Gray. Looking at the photograph in your package, you know, I see the sign is addressing the corner, which I understand the logic of. Yet a couple of the comments of your neighbors suggest they would prefer it near the gate to your parking lot. This photograph makes it look like from the intersection it will be quite visible from there. And I wonder if you would consider honoring their request and moving it closer to that gate, and rather than having it at the corner.
If that would be what would be necessary to get this to go through, then yeah, that would we would look at making concessions or something like that. Sam, do you have any?
Yeah, I mean, we just need to see closer to the sign on Glenside. I mean, right now there's just some bushes right there and gravel. There's nothing on that corner, and so it aligns with where the ramp comes up from where the concrete is. So we make it even and level where it's not out of alignment from the other parts of the intersection right there, the natural alignment with everything. So we're not making it stand out.
It does not stand out at all. It's pushed way back. And actually the entrance to Las Trampas is, if you look, it's probably another 20 or 30 feet to your right on the southwest facing portion of the sign. It's very close to the entrance already. So.
And
Alrighty.
The other comment I had, your color choice was criticized. I think the brown and the white is very typical of the signs in the neighborhood. The aqua zing paint color is in fact zingy. That's what it's called in your documents. And that to me, I think could be seen as a little bit foreign to the graphic scheme of the neighborhood. If you considered toning down the color scheme as your only change to the design, I think that your neighbors might be pleased, and I would personally think it's a little more compatible with the color of the graphics in the neighborhood.
Okay.
And that's fine. We can make some changes to that to get that. Yeah, we can do that. No problem.
That's
All right. Do we have any other questions, Glenn?
No.
Okay. All right. Well, no questions. We're going to open up to public comment. So Jonathan, you said we have some public comment?
Correct. I'll read those into the record. These are comments that were received from the start of the meeting until now. So first we have a comment from Bill Hagebeck and Ryan Siamis at 3251 and 3256 Woodview Drive. It states, "Dear Jonathan Fox, Lafayette Design Review, and our friends at Las Trampas Pool Club. Thank you for the opportunity to provide feedback on your proposed sign on the corner of St. Mary's Road and Glenside Drive. We respectfully object to the proposed sign on this corner. Not only will it be in direct view from our respective homes, it would not blend in with the natural residential neighborhood setting. Adding a sign on this corner adds a commercial component to an otherwise beautiful, bucolic neighborhood. This sign would be in field view of our homes and a negative impact on our property values. I've spoken with Jonathan Fox and we have provided him with our alternative suggestions, which include: 1, placing a sign between the 2 Las Trampas gates on Glenside, across the street from the church sign and busy trail area, and 2, a more subtle color palette that blends in with natural settings. I have attached pictures below, and I'll share those pictures here. Okay, so this is a picture, intersection St. Mary's Road, Glenside. That's the proposed area. And we'll go to the second. This is at the southern property line where the gates are. And lastly, we have a picture of the Lafayette Moraga Regional Trail sign existing. Okay, our next comment is from Michael Thompson. It's a question asking, will this sign obstruct the view of drivers to see other cars or pedestrians approaching the intersection? Seems to be an issue that should be considered due to the high incidence of accidents in this area. And that is the end of the comments that we've received.
So we did think of that. That's why we put it at a diagonal. The cars coming from Glenside and cars coming from St. Mary's from Lafayette going to Moraga would still be able to see both left and right as they go on the up to the top. It's 10 feet back from the street and at a diagonal, so it's not, we did consider that. And going back to the comment of moving it in between the 2 gates, I think the main issue with that is a lot of people driving on St. Mary's wouldn't see the sign if it's in between the 2 different gates we have now. And since the pool's been founded in 1958, there has never been a sign. It's been a pool there, but we, as a pool, our membership, we'd like for people to know who we are. Other pools in the area like Rancho have the same type of sign, but we just don't have any visibility of what we are on that corner. So that's the main reason. And we can certainly change the colors. That's not an issue, but I think the location of the sign, we can even move it back farther if you want. There's just a drainage right there in the gravel. So if that's an issue, we can certainly move it back a little bit farther. But we would like to keep it on the corner if at all possible.
All right, thank you. So I'm going to close the public comment period, and I guess John, you already started, so why don't you go ahead and start?
Apologies if I spoke out of turn on that part.
No, not at all. That was a question. It's fine.
I think I said most of what I needed to say. I understand your desire to express your identity outside the site. I've lived in Lafayette for 11 years, and for half of that time, I didn't know what your site was. It took me a little while to figure it out. So I get that, and I appreciate that. And I would just ask that you try to accommodate some of your neighbors' concerns regarding the prominence and appearance, and just tone it down a little bit. I personally kind of understand the corner location as being the most visible, which is got pluses for your visibility and minuses because your neighbors find it too visible. I wouldn't say that I could make a decision on the location question. I see pros and cons. That's it.
All right, thanks, John. Glenn?
I thought this was going to be totally non-controversial, but I guess I'm wrong. I sort of am in favor of moving the sign between the two gates. That's why I asked the question whether the driveway entry is only on Glenn's side, while the sign in the corner would be more visible to St. Mary's Road. Nevertheless, those vehicles have to turn on the Glen side to get into the property. So from Glen's side, it's visible to anyone that's trying to actually enter the property. As far as colors go, I think there's a number of things, either the bluish zinc color, tone it down some. I actually am not opposed to having a sign that all the print and all and the seahorses are just white.
That's fine. We can do that.
But that's my comment. The size is okay. The lettering, I find everything okay. I just think that to accommodate the visibility it would work. Maybe not as, it would be not as preferential, but on the other hand, you've gone so many years without a sign in between the two entrances would definitely work.
Thank you, Glenn. Eugene?
I think I don't want to replicate other commissioners' comments. I think I agree with both Commissioner Gray and Commissioner Cass on that working with the neighborhood, if there's a goodwill and the neighbors have these kind of sentiment, maybe kind of take that into account. And I definitely agree with Commissioner Gray and Cass on the color, that color should be toned down. Again, I echo everyone else. Thank you.
All right. So I didn't really have a problem with the corner. I kind of think that it makes the most sense to have it on the corner. I'm not concerned really by the visibility because, like you said, the sign is set back and it is a four-way stop sign. So I can't imagine someone's driving 30 miles an hour and judging if they can blow through it or turn left. So the visibility, given that it's set back and it's a four-way stop, not such a big concern. If you're open to muting the colors, I think it's important to address concerns of the neighbors. That said, it does seem sensible to put the sign between the two entrances. I'm looking at the street view on Google Maps, and it seems like the ideal place to have the sign. It's not going to be as visible. I don't know. It has some goodwill to the neighborhood if you move the sign, but I can see it both ways. I don't really have. Are you open to moving the sign there? Is it something that you really feel you really want it on the corner?
I think we would really want it on the corner. We can change the colors. We can make the seahorses white color, if that would work. If we could keep it on the corner, I would really love to do that. We have neighbors that live on, that live on St. Mary's and then further up one side, and it would be nice for them to get to see the sign also.
Okay, so I guess hearing that, I would make a motion that we have them propose a lighter, more muted color, but keep the sign where the sign is. And that would be my motion. If one of you want to modify that or disagree with me, I'm open to that too.
I could second that, Patrick. I could second that, as long as the color is muted. And I now hearing from the applicant how important it is from their strategic point of view to have that, as long as it's muted. And that's, I would second it, Patrick. I'm seconding it.
All right, so then I guess we have a second, so we're going to vote. Oh,
Chair Collins, if it's your intention, you may want to rephrase the motion to add a condition of approval.
yes, I'm
stating
sorry.
that-
I would like to add a condition of approval that either, I think staff can probably handle the muting of the color. You don't need to have one of us. If there's an issue, you can have one of
Well,
us
he
come.
was willing to take white.
Yeah.
He was willing to do white.
Yeah, we are.
Okay, if we're going to do white and just similar to the other sign, you guys, that's great. Then it's white. Is that your modification of my motion, Glenn?
That's one.
Okay, that's a modification of my motion, which I accept. Can I still get a second from Commissioner Sim?
I will second that motion with the modification.
All right. All those in favor, I'm going to say aye. Eugene?
Aye. Aye.
Glenn?
Nay.
Nay. Okay. And John?
I,
All right.
Thanks.
So it passes 3-1 for a non-contentious sign. So yeah, there's a 14-day appeal for this also, right, Jonathan? So
That's correct.
all right. That concludes this one.
Thank you, guys.
Good luck with the
Thank you very
sign.
much. Thank you.
All right, jumping to the next thing. All righty, our next item up, we have no continued public hearings and new public hearing DR 22-19 TP 49-19, and Sarah is our planner.
And I just want to clarify, I have one person, Peter Shaddick, in the waiting room. Is that part of your development team, Claire?
Peter was the property owner for the study session.
Oh, okay. Great. Okay, let me share my screen and see. Oops, that's not what I meant to do. Got it, done, present. Okay, everyone see that? All right. Good evening, commissioners. The item before you tonight is a new application for a demolition and construction of a new apartment project. So I am just going to go quickly over the project details, a little bit about context, a little bit about the density bonus that they're requesting, the review process for the project, talk a little bit about the downtown specific plan, downtown design guidelines, public comment, and then staff recommendation. So as I mentioned, the request is to demolish an existing structure and build a new development. The existing structure is a 47-unit multifamily residential apartment building, some of which have been converted to commercial uses. And then proposal is a 71-unit apartment project, as including 9 below market rate units. Both they're including apartments and townhomes. The height is 56 feet in height. Parking provided is 93 spaces, including tandem spaces. They're proposing to remove 49 trees They're incorporating a plaza, a parklet, and retail component to the project. It is residential and retail use. So it's located on Golden Gateway and First Street. There are 2 parcels to be merged together. There is a channelized creek along the southern property line. And it is adjacent to the library. So across to the north is the library. And then we have the nut factory immediately adjacent to the east. We have a City of Lafayette parking lot to the west. And then we have single family residential below to the south. So just want to talk a little bit about the state density bonus law. So the City of Lafayette has a requirement for inclusionary housing. 15% of the units need to be affordable. And then there's beyond that, there's the state density bonus law, which allows for additional density when there is a certain level of affordability provided. So the more affordable units are, the more density can be requested. And in this case, they qualify for a 35% increase in the number of units. In addition to the increased density, they also qualify for concessions and waivers. So we might typically think of those as variances, but in this case, state density bonus law allows for those waivers in order to accommodate the project. So just in terms of context, I think this site section shows a bit better the channelized creek to the south, and then the library to the north. So it's sort of in context with that, the height and scale of that, of the library, the library building along Golden Gateway. And then as you can see from this enlargement of the facade, they have done a very good job of providing a lot of articulation and shadow relief, undulation in the building facade. There's a low scale elements along the street frontage, and then also the townhomes on the corner are a little bit more low scale as well. So this project is located in the Plaza Way area that's outlined in the downtown specific plan. And that area of town is supposed to be sort of the community living room. And there's an intention to have sort of projects closer to the street, kind of having that pedestrian interest along the street frontages there. In addition, it was also in the downtown specific plan, a portion of the plan calling for a library park in this location on the corner that is currently used as a parking lot. And the applicant has provided a plaza as an homage to that request. I'll note that this is not a subdivision, and it is on private property, so that the park is not necessarily something we could require of this applicant, but they have been working with the city to create that plaza and that open feel, including some additional pavement markings to kind of blur that line between public and private property. Additionally, there is the section in the downtown specific plan calling for enhancement of the creek in this area. I will mention that it is a channelized creek. I'm sure if you visited this site, you saw that. They have indicated, so we have had some conversations with the Creeks Committee, and they would prefer a pathway along there. The applicant is hesitant to install a pathway there since it sort of isn't going to connect to anything at this point. So there is discussion and encouragement to provide an easement that would sort of be triggered if and when adjacent developments were also could also play into that, so that it would be there and available when and if we could make the connections as the plan had envisioned. So in terms of process, we're here first at the Design Review Commission. We're looking at context, bulk, mass, privacy, articulations, colors, materials, landscaping, all of these kind of details. You then will provide a recommendation to the Planning Commission. They are the reviewing body for new buildings in the downtown. And then finally, it will go to the City Council, who will take final action. It requires their review based on the height concession waiver. In terms of, we did send out our notice of public hearing for this meeting and received several public comments, which were either included in the packet or forwarded to you earlier today, the ones that we've received. Many of the comments were related to sort of context, height, parking and traffic, and then trees as well. In terms of referral comments, we did receive some referral comments, but do expect more. With that, I would recommend that you provide comments to the applicant as relates to all of those elements, and then continue the matter to the 27th in order to allow the applicant to address those comments. I'm available for questions if you have any.
This is Glenn. I have a question. It may be my confusion, but regarding the easement, at one point in time, and I may have reversed this, we could do an easement on an apartment, but we can't do an easement on condos or vice versa. So how is that now changed that we're now back talking about an easement again along the creek?
So as I mentioned, it's when there's a subdivision involved, then the city may require some additional items such as easements or walkways, things like that. In this case, they're not requesting a subdivision, so we can't formally require it, but there has been some discussion with the Creeks Committee, and I'm sure the applicant will address that as well.
Alrighty.
So it's more of a working cooperatively rather than a requirement.
Thank you. Anything else, Glenn?
No other question.
Eugene?
None
John?
at this time.
Oh,
You're on mute.
all right.
No questions for Sarah. Thank you.
All right. Thank you.
And then before we move on, I have a 510-222-4020. Is that part of the applicant team? No. Okay.
All righty. So do we have an
It may
applicant?
be, but I'm not sure based off of the phone number.
Okay. Well, welcome.
Thank you.
This is your opportunity to present us.
Oh, great. Let me, and I can just screen share, Sarah.
Yes, that'd be great.
Okay. Can you guys see the main screen,
Yes.
the full screen?
Yes.
Cool. Okay. Good evening, commissioners, staff, and community members. Thank you for the opportunity to be able to present our project tonight via this platform. I understand I have limited amount of time tonight, and since this is technically our third time of appearing in front of the commission, I'll try to move through this as quickly as possible. The most notable change since the last study session, as Sarah mentioned, is obviously the unit count and the height. The project that we had proposed and put forth last year in May and August was for a 3-story 51 unit building. And this project now, by utilizing the state density bonus, is for a 4-story and 71 unit building. So we've submitted revised applications for design review, state density bonus law, as well as tree removal permits and for demolition. I wanted to start off by discussing the ground floor and how the project relates to the street a bit, especially as it relates to the public plaza that we are proposing for the corner of the building. some of the comments that we had received during the August study session was that the plaza area needs to have a more active feel to it. And one of the suggestions during then was to consider putting in possibly a children's play structure in that corner. And I think, we studied that possibility, but I think due to the proximity to the intersection there and just the depth, or the fact that we don't actually have that much depth, just does not lend itself well to having a tot lot. But we did try to incorporate some of those activating elements into the design itself. So in addition to the plaza, we've also incorporated other design elements that are intended to enhance the pedestrian experience. In general, that includes the public plaza, a parklet that is in the middle of Golden Gateway, and also by widening the sidewalk along here on Golden Gateway. Also, the number of driveway entrances along Golden Gateway, there's currently 3, have been eliminated or reduced to 1, reducing the instances in which pedestrians and vehicles intersect on that street. As you can see here in the public plaza, we're proposing to incorporate an element of public art that can also be used as either an interactive play structure or street furnishings. And down below is a concept that we had presented previously of the shipping container retail or cafe space. And this is really intended to serve more contemporary in nature. I think the concept of a pop-up in these containers have done really well in other cities in the US and also abroad. And so I think in the beginning, we had explored incorporating a bit of retail into the brick and mortar of our project. But at the end of the day, I think we collectively decided between DRC staff and our team that having a permanent establishment within the building wouldn't necessarily make as much sense as having something that can easily be changed and adapted depending on whatever the use ends up being. And the flexibility that something like this affords to the ground floor commercial space that sometimes has a really, can struggle. Ground floor retail leasing can be pretty tricky, and this type of format, I think, lends much better to this setting. And also to the right, you see is the proposed parklet that we would install about midway down Golden Gateway, which we believe will help to activate the street further and enhance the sidewalk experience. And as Sarah mentioned, so we have had a meeting with the Lafayette Creeks Commission. We actually had a really productive meeting with Jeff Gilman and David Clark, as well as staff members from Engineering Services, Sarah, and our project team. And if you can recall, during our site walk, the existing conditions of the Lafayette Creek, as you can see in the photos in the left, are surrounded by cyclone fencing with barbed wire, and that's really necessitated by the deep drop that you have between the top of the concrete channel down to the bottom of the bank, which is approximately 9 feet. And due to the depth and the speed at which the water moves through the channel during rain season, that's what is really necessitating the cyclone fencing and the barbed wire. And at the meeting that we had with the Creeks Commission, this was after our second study session, in which we were directed to explore options to be able to install the Creekway as is suggested in the Downtown Creeks plan. And during that discussion, we agreed with the commission, or the commission agreed with us, in that the trailness wouldn't really make sense until there was imminent plans also to be able to connect that walkway all the way through to 2nd Street. Given that there aren't any current plans for redeveloping any other parcels along Golden Gateway that would allow us to connect into that to 2nd Street. Us constructing a walkway along the back of the building would really only create a dead-end trail without a connection, and which we think would be attractive or attract nuisance and create safety and security threats. And as a part of that discussion, however, we let the commission and the city staff know that we would not preclude a possibility of future development, that a walkway could be built there should all of the other parcels be built out and to help connect that walkway. But in the interim, we will also explore options to incorporate public art into the site fencing. These are some images I actually pulled from the Downtown Creeks plan, in which public art panels or design panels are incorporated into the creek area. So we would seek to replace the cyclone fencing and the barbed wire around this area and replace it with something that's more aesthetically pleasing. And in addition, other Downtown Creeks plan implementation strategies that we are going to incorporate into our plans is to remove all the non-native species planting and the vegetation that have really been overgrown around this area. Also provide the necessary monitoring and lastly, provide LID stormwater treatment along the top of the bank so that we are helping to improve the quality of the water inflows into the creek itself. And I wanted to walk you through our design process and how we got to the proposed plan that's in front of you guys today, since it is different from what we shared with the commission last year. And the revised applications for a state density bonus is really a direct result of the unique set of site constraints that stem from the topography and the regularity of the site shape. We've shared with you these previously, but to jog your memory, starting on the ground floor, because of the presence of the flood zone of the 100-year floodplain in the ground floor level, it takes away from our ability to develop approximately 30% of the building floor area. So that only leaves 70% of the subterranean floor level for us to be able to improve with parking spaces. And then on the ground floor, we're left with about 76% of buildable floor area after you deduct for the Lafayette Creek itself, and then the flood control district's easement that runs along with that, and then the public plaza space at the corner there. And then moving up to the 3rd floor, due to the regularity of the shape of our site, it's a 9-sided lot. The 50-foot setback is really takes away from the buildable floor area of this floor. And so when you account for the 50-foot setback from all sides, which makes up about 45,000 square feet, the remaining floor area that we can actually put units on is only 30% of that whole area. And then lastly, the item that I wanted to highlight was that the site is about 400 feet across, and in that 400 linear feet across Golden Gateway, the site elevation changes 9 feet. So at the corner of Golden Gateway and 1st Street, the grade elevation there is about 286 feet. And then by the time you walk down all the way over to the nut factory, it drops by 9 feet and becomes 277 feet. And this actually has a material impact on the application itself, because when we submitted our first design review application after the 2nd study session, we received plan check comments from staff that in addition to the setback variance that we had included as part of our application last year, we would also need a height variance due to the way that the city of Lafayette calculates height. And so in addition to the 50-foot setback variance that we had previously or originally looked for, we would also need a height variance. And based on that, staff had laid out 2 possible options for us. One was apply for the variances for the height and setback, and another alternative they provided for us was to take a look at the state density bonus option. And we really hadn't looked at the state density bonus option until then, and we didn't consider it to be a viable option, frankly, just because I didn't know enough about it. But we looked into the issue further and found out that there was also other projects that were moving through entitlements process or had already been approved by the city of Lafayette that were asking for similar, if not same, concessions and waivers. And so with the bonus of the added units, we thought that this was definitely the best way to go. And Sarah shared with us many of the community comments and feedback we've gotten after the public notice for the hearing went out. And I understand that a lot of it had to do with the parking for the project. And I just wanted to highlight that the project as proposed provides parking spaces well in excess of what's actually required by code. So as you can see on the table in the upper right-hand corner, we would be required to provide 55 spaces for our residential units and 8 guest parking spaces. And this seems relatively low to the number of units we have because under Lafayette Code, parking for 3rd floor units, and you extrapolate that for the 4th floor, there are no parking requirements for those units located on those floors. And additionally, since we are within half a mile of the Lafayette BART station, the parking requirement is eligible for a 5% reduction, which equals 3 spaces and would bring down the total required number of spaces to 60. But we also understand that the project doesn't exist in a vacuum, and there are concerns from community members regarding the current parking challenges that stem from the use of the library and just the activities and the businesses around the vicinity. But with that said, we are providing 33 additional spaces than what is required in order to provide parking for all of our residents as well as guests. And we believe that due to the...
You've actually exceeded your time, and I gave you an extra minute and a half. So can you close it up?
So, yep. Well, then I think this was illustrative of the setback requirement or what we are asking for in excess of that. So the red highlighted areas are the setback areas that we are looking to get waivers from through the state density bonus. This next section highlights again just the site challenges that we have due to the height, the grade changes between Golden Gateway and First, and the red highlighted sections show what we are asking in excess of what is allowed by code. And then these 2 renderings are intended to show sort of how the buildings would be perceived at each of these locations. So this is Golden Gateway looking west, and the relative scale and proportion to that of the library. And here is a view looking at the townhomes, which are still remaining as 2 stories along First, looking northeast. And then lastly, this was a slide to share with you guys some of the materials and color inspiration that we had pulled from prominent buildings in Lafayette and ones that had been previously suggested by DRC as recommended for inspiration. That's it. Thank you.
All right. Any questions for the applicant, Glenn?
So are you, do I understand, are you willing to accept a resolution to have an easement along the creek in the future for future development if similar easements can be obtained through to 2nd Street?
Yeah, so the easement that we are open to exploring with, because I say open to exploring because it's ultimately at the discretion of the flood control district. But the easement itself is not an issue for us. So because there's already a no build easement, which is in this area, that these are our C3 planners that are just staying outside of them. So there's already a no build easement from the flood control district. And so it would really be up to their discretion and approval. But it's my understanding based on our conversations with Jeff and David that they've already started that conversation, not just here, but elsewhere. So that's something that they would be open to. I wanted to get some firm up our proposed plans a bit before going to the FCD and letting them know what our intent was, but it's my understanding that they would be okay with that.
Okay, I'm still confused by parking. Because you are not required to provide parking for third and fourth floor units? Is that what you said?
Yes, that's what C1 zoning says in the Lafayette Municipal Code.
Okay, and you said there's a total of 92 spaces or no?
93,
93 spaces.
yes.
And how many of those 93 are tandem?
36.
And how many are guest or designated for guest?
We are asking for elimination of guest parking through the state density bonus law. But with that said, because there are so many tandem spaces, theoretically the tandem spaces could be used for guest parking.
Okay, but otherwise you're providing 0. Okay.
Yes.
Okay, and one other question. If you look at the height, okay, where the townhouse portion starts, the height of the building on Mount Diablo Boulevard, the closest part to First Street, how high is the building at that point?
Sorry, from Golden Gateway? Or
On Golden Gateway, I'm not talking about the townhouse portion or the smaller ones on First Street, but the larger building, what
at
is
its tallest, the building is 56 feet.
the tallest? But
Yes.
that 56 feet is down there.
It's
near
really
front
the pitch of this roof you see here. The peak of this pitch roof.
I don't see where your arrow is, so I'm having.
Oh, to the
Okay.
left, in
I
the
see now.
building section, at the very top of this roof.
Is it the top of the roof or is it the average of that slope?
No, the 56 feet is to the peak of this roof line.
Okay. And to the flat part of the roof, just below your arrow, what is that?
That's probably another 3 feet, so 53.
53, okay. Thank you.
Sure.
Eugene, any questions?
Hi, no, I don't have any questions right now. Well, no, I do have one question. It's about that same drawing that was discussed just now with Glenn. Just want to make sure I don't see it clearly on my screen. I just want to confirm all the vertical clearances, finished floor to finished floor, that just readability is hard for me on my screen. Is that 10 feet, 9 feet 6, 9.6? 9.6, and then is that 8.6 or 8.8 at the top? And then you got the rest of it was structured 8.5? Okay,
Yes.
got it. I just wanted to get clarity there. That's all. Thank you.
You got it.
John, any questions?
No, I don't have questions right now.
Awesome, thank you. All right, Sarah, do we have public comments?
Do have a public comment, and I'm just gonna set the timer to make sure. Well, it is from Jeff Gilman. And it says, to Designery Commissioners and staff, I am Jeffrey Gilman, Vice Chair of the Lafayette Creeks Committee. The record should indicate that David Clark of the Creeks Committee and I met with the applicant and its design consultants on October 17th, 2019. Approved minutes from that meeting are attached. While the project plan submitted for tonight's meeting reflect a lot of what was agreed to, the Creeks Committee wants to highlight 2 issues that need to be addressed. First, a screening fence on the western side of the site lies within the flood control easement, which will encumber or may preclude future use of this area for a creekside trail. Second, the project plans or project scope did not address replacing some of the existing cyclone fencing along the creek channel with a more aesthetic design. Our other comments are, first, the project should more substantially comply with the downtown design guidelines for creeks, in particular for embracing creeks and connecting the public to them. We recommend a creek viewing area or a mini plaza in the southwestern corner of the property. The viewing area could tie in nicely to public art in that area, including applying artistic decorations to the fencing along the creek channel. Finally, the project plans do not appear to have been referred to the Contra Costa County Public Works Department Flood Control District, which should be done since the project is adjacent to the Flood Control District right-of-way and creek channel. Thank you. And then I have one from Andy Brown. Hi, my name is Andy Brown and I live a few doors down from this project. This is a very important corner location and one that requires a very thoughtful design given the unique nature of its frontage on Golden Gate Way across from the library and its backing immediately onto the creek and a single family neighborhood. I spoke in favor of this project when it was last in front of the Design Review Commission, but I have significant concerns with the very different plan that is now proposed. I was very discouraged to see such a major shift in the project without engaging the community, especially when the developer made it as clear as possible that he would stay within the existing city zoning. Parking, massing, and design are some of the key areas of concern that I have noted in my letter that was submitted to the city earlier today. I won't restate my entire letter, but just wanted to let the commission know that I am here and make sure that the full comments were received. Thank you. Those are the public comments I have received.
All right. Thank you very much. Clara, would you like to respond?
Sure. So as I'll respond to David's comment first. So the 10-foot width for the walkway was a comment that we had also received from Lafayette Public Works as part of plan check for this particular submittal. We were not aware of that width until very recently. And right before the hearing, I had our design consultants take a look at pushing basically the fence that we have. And I apologize if you can't see this a little bit clearer, but right now the location of this orange dotted line that you can see that runs parallel to the southern portion of this building is set about 4 feet off. And at most of these, along this fence location, there's a minimum of 10 feet off the top of bank, but there is a little bit of a point here where it becomes reduced to about 8 feet. But as you can see, there's some room here. So we'll push that fence back closer to the building so that at all points along the creek that 10 feet clearance is maintained. And as far as the other comments regarding cyclone fence replacement, that would definitely require some input from the FCD, because the reason that those chain link fences exist is to keep people out, and the barbed wire especially, so that people don't hop over the fence and go into the creek. But we will definitely be working with FCD and looking to incorporate that into our next submittal. So we will follow up on that issue. And then as far as Andy's comments were concerned, we received her comment letter, and to be honest, the public hearing meeting was sort of short notice, and given the shelter in place, I admit we weren't able to coordinate a community meeting prior to this hearing. But we've had 2 different community meetings prior to our study sessions, and we'll definitely continue to do so. And I think, you know, now given the shelter in place orders and with the indefinite extension of that, or unknown extension of that, we are looking to host the community meeting also via a webinar Zoom format.
All right, thank you very much. I'm going to close the public comment portion of this and provide comments. I think, Glenn, it sounds like you're raring to go there, so have at it.
I'm not raring to go. Okay, let's talk about the creek first, okay? I definitely want wording in the resolution about the easement so that it's clear when we refer back to it in the future, which may never occur. And I'll honestly say it probably will never occur. But that if a similar easement is available to Second Street, that creek path would be available on the property.
Sorry, would you mind stopping your screen share?
Sure.
Sorry, just so.
Okay. Number 2 is regarding your diagram L2. I would like you to meet with Park and Rec and actually decide on an interactive play structure so that we're not just looking at conceptual and then a year from now, somehow it just falls through and we get hardly anything. Okay. So I'd like that to be resolved by Park and Rec, who are the likely people who are responsible for that. Parking is my main problem. Okay, I'm at a quandary because I see, number 1 is the city has created their own nemesis if they're not requiring any parking for C1 under C1 for 3rd and 4th floor structures. But the idea of providing no guest parking and having 71 units there and putting all that onto the street is just not going to work. I come to the library very, very frequently, and I can tell you is that at least 30% of the time that I go, well, I would say 50% of the time I go, the garage in the library has the sign on that says full. And 30% of the time that when I come there, I have to actually park as far away as 2nd Street or even around the corner to Moraga Boulevard. So parking is not available. There's all these visions for what's going to happen with the theater. The fact that there's no guest parking is, I could not approve this project simply from an architectural standpoint that parking is not available for that standpoint. As far as the height variance, I think it's awfully high, but that's really going to be city council that decides that in the end, whether it's approved or not. I mean, I understand with the bonus density and all that other stuff. I do have some questions. I do have some massing problems with that because I don't have so much with the 50-foot setback along Golden Gate, but I see now that it's back along the creek side. A portion of it is back along the creek side from the one diagram you showed us. And actually along that portion of the creek, the homes on Moraga Boulevard are actually lower than what your building is. So that means that your building is actually going to look more like 5 stories high in that area, or equivalent to about a 5-story high. So I have a problem with that, infringing on that setback, because it really creates this mass for the neighbors who are in 1 story, most of them on 1-story structures across on Rockland Boulevard. Colors, I don't have a problem with. I sort of like the way that the transition to the lower structures immediately on Golden Gate and then the bigger building back. There's many good features here, but I just, parking is the Achilles heel to me. That's pretty much my comment.
All right, thanks, Glenn. Eugene?
Yes, Chair. My comments from the get-go was the concern about the massing and sightline characteristics on the backside toward the creek, toward the neighborhood on the back. And I appreciate Commissioner Cass pointing out again, topographically, those are in a lower datum line, vertical control points than it is where this currently proposed project is. And I do still have concern about the massing sideline look from the neighbors across the creek looking back at it, and I still don't have a good sense of how that appearance feels from the across the creek neighborhood. So I do want to make some positive comments though. The main Golden Gate facade seems to have very interesting, very elaborate characteristics of massing, right? The lower pieces moving up to the higher pieces, and kind of like a finger floor plan that allows these courtyard features to create deep shadow cast inside the facade of that Golden Gate elevation. However, I want to point out, as I allude to that facade, that we make sure the developer and the architect assure us how the internal part of that courtyard that is visually, transparently seen from the street, but not accessible, of course, those are private courtyards, that the articulation of the interior of those courtyards, because they're very visible from that street, that the facade as it turns back in toward the indented facade inside inset on the street would all be further refined and indicated clearly, because on the rendering, on the drawing, I don't get a very clear sense. I know that the characteristics are going to be similar to the material and the texture that you allude on the facade, generally speaking, but I'm going to be very careful to say that I'm going to be very high on looking at that detail on the inside of all, those courtyards as the entire totality of that facade. So that's one I would like to say. So massing, I do think that whether the height is too high or not, again, beyond our jurisdiction on that discussion, but massing characteristics on the Golden Gate side and the other corner there seems to be in keeping with our intent there. The envelope indicator by the materials chosen and elaborate features, I think there's some rhythm there and variety there. But I do want to make sure that we understand the logic behind the color and the juxtaposition of materials and the way it works on the facade. I would like to get a further sense of that from the architect. So those are my comments. And of course, we're always looking at night scene as well, the lighting. And I know you have some lighting fixtures chosen, bollards and all, but I'd be interested in how light is also working to light up those courtyards, lighting up the, of course, the commercial venue in the corner. Also, if we're going to do this with the container approach with the commercial piece in the corner, I'd be more interested in looking at the detail of that container. I do see the texture that is shown on the facade, but I don't see any sectional details or any real commitment in terms of that final solution that is going to be pleasing to our eyes. And so I want to make sure we're committed. We have the details to show evidence of that commitment, not just a conceptual rendering and some material call out. So I'll be looking very detailed about that. That's it at this point, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Eugene. John?
Thank you. First, I wanted to say that there are a number of things I do appreciate about the design. Given the size and height, I think you've done very nice things to mitigate that, to vary the massing, to step it down, to kind of break it up. That said, still pretty big. And there are a few things a few locations where I think that size is especially evident. Yeah, as you go along the street frontage facade on Golden Gate, I'm glad to see the lower units at the corner with First Street. As you move down the street along the larger building, there are 3 indents where the full 4-story height of the building is visible from ground to roof line, if I'm understanding your design correctly, where you have the little indents. And the one that is most concerning to me is the one at the driveway entrance. At the driveway entrance, there is, you do not have any landscaping, obviously, because there's a driveway there. And you've got a full vertical 4-story facade. I would ask if you might consider some sort of a gateway feature or something to interrupt the full 4-story vertical at that location. The other 2, your landscape drawings suggest there are significant trees planted in those other 2 spots, if I'm interpreting your plan correctly. And with appropriate landscaping, I think the height concern is mitigated. The 50-foot setback, I understand that in order to build the amount of building you need to build, you really struggle with that. But I guess I would ask, does it need to be quite that much? You have pushed not only the 3rd floor, but the 4th floor very, very close to the building line in many places. If the building could still work and get to someplace in between the normal 50-foot setback requirement and where you are today, I would, and I suspect your neighbors would be a little more comfortable with the apparent mass of the building. And finally, regarding the backyard view, I know that the creekside portion of this site is pretty densely treed right now. I'm not sure how much of that is being impacted by your construction. I would like to be able to see on behalf of the neighbors behind what the real visibility of this building is through those trees after your work is done. If the density of trees along the creek is enough to really provide a screen between your building and the neighbors, that would be great. But I can't really tell right now. I just know there's a lot of trees there right now. One more comment. I know there's been discussion about the retail, this little container box. This is my first involvement in a conversation about that. And I have to say, personally, I'm not convinced of that solution. I would say it is not in character with anything I've seen in this town. You all can correct me if I'm wrong. I would prefer to see something better integrated, even if it's small scale. It's hard for me to know about the rental issues that you brought up regarding tenants, but to me, this seems inconsistent with what I would expect. I would expect to see something that might still be small scale, but integrated in the architecture and not looking like sort of an inexpensive afterthought like this. So that's
Thank you,
my
John.
comments. Thank you.
I'm going to echo to some extent some of the previous comments, but we're tasked at Design Review Commission with addressing the bulk and mass. And I guess John touched on it a little bit. This is a massive building, and you're asking for concession and waivers to eliminate the 50-foot setback, which is definitely addressing bulk and massing. And you're doing a 4-story, which makes it very bulky and massive. I do like the design you've presented to us. I think there's a lot of things that really break that up, but there are definitely areas that are a concern. I think in the 2 other times we saw this, I've been most focused on the entrance and how on so many buildings, the entrance looks like a gaping hole into a building when it has subterranean parking. And to some extent, you address it a little, but I got to agree with Commissioner Gray that you need to do something more there. That's a big, tall, open pit. I'm also concerned about the building section that's the furthest to the east, where it kind of kicks up at the end, where the nut house or the nut farm, right to the one side there. It's a very big element and it steps out to the street. And I just think from a massing perspective that could be softened. It's nicely softened on the other side and it steps in as you come down the street, but then it kind of kicks up at the end. And that, I think that it would be beneficial to have that, I don't know, addressed. I am concerned about the height from the backside and that the most of, or quite a bit of the existing trees are coming down. That's more a question, I guess, for city council, but to address the bulking and massing of something that's massive and bulky, I don't know how far we can go with that. I'm going to side with Glenn on the parking too. I've seen many projects, and maybe it's the city's own doing, but I've seen many projects across many different cities that say that people are going to walk the BART or whatever the public transit is, and they end up just parking their superfluous cars in the neighborhoods. And this is already an area where parking is of a premium, and to not have any guest parking seems insane to me. It just you're not gonna, during a pandemic, maybe you won't have many visitors, but you're going to have visitors when you're allowed to have visitors, and they're going to drive there and they're going to need to park somewhere. And that's very, very concerning. And I guess the last thing, there's a lot of talk about that fence in the back, and anything you can do to make a better fence, even in coordination with the flood control district. I think the people that are going to be in your building are going to really appreciate looking out on something other than that horrible fence. So I would like that you come up with, I thought your proposed plan was nice. I don't think it's going to work because it's only like 3 or 4 feet high and people are going to jump over that to their deaths in the pit. But if you can come up something that looks a little better than barbed wire and cyclone fence, I'm all for that. So Sarah, what are we looking for here? We gave them comments and we want to kick it to the next meeting, the 27th. Is that
Correct.
okay?
So it'll be continuing to a date certain to allow.
So we don't really have any, we don't have to do anything other than just kick it to a date certain based on comments.
Correct.
Is there anything else, Glenn, you want to add to? Anyone else want to add? We're basically going to kick this to the 27th, right? Did I articulate enough of my stuff and your stuff and John's stuff?
Could I just make one point of clarification?
Sure.
So the requested waiver regarding the 50-foot setback is not for an elimination of the 50-foot setback. Rather, it's for a variance in certain locations for where that 50-foot setback is accepted. So along the backside of the project where it abuts the creek and it faces the single family homes, it's only a small portion of the site on the southwestern portion of the building that extends beyond the 50-foot setback line. And at most, it extends 35 feet. But everywhere else on the 3rd floor, the setback can be up to 80 feet because the building is stepped back so far from the creek. And on the 4th floor, we are within the 50-foot setback entirely along the backside. So there's no encroachment into that 50-foot setback area towards the single family homes on the 4th floor. I just wanted that to be clarified that we're not asking for an elimination of the 50-foot setback requirement.
But you are over 35 feet back there, aren't you?
The fourth floor is completely within the 50 feet setback on the backside along the southern portion of the site.
Patrick, were you asking about height or?
Sorry?
I was clarifying if Patrick was asking about height.
I was specifically talking about height. I'm scrolling through the drawings on to find the one that had the over 35 foot. I don't.
That's regarding the height. The setback is the 50 foot on the third floor.
Right, and I understand what you're saying, and I don't dispute what you're saying. I'm clarifying that the backside, you're exceeding 35 feet in the back, right? Isn't that?
Yes.
What drawing is the one that had the nice, pretty red three-dimensional?
I
on her
believe it's
back,
page
it's not
6 or 6 of the architectural drawings. But I can also put it up on the screen again if I can get.
That would be good so everyone can see what
Yeah.
we're talking about.
Sure. Is this the? Can you guys see my screen?
Yes, so my concern that I was talking about is how big the building is in the back, and it's not specifically to the 50-foot setback and your triangle that you talked about, but it's
Okay.
how tall the building appears to the people to the back of the building. And that entire red section is really what I'm talking about. And whether that's because of the 50 feet or it's because it's over 35, it's still there. And that's kind of what I was getting at. But yes, I appreciate your clarification.
Sure.
All right. So Glenn, were you done or were you?
I just wanted to not necessarily make a rebuttal comment, but in opposition to John, he's actually right about the container. I don't think we have any container retail in Lafayette. I actually personally like the idea. It works very well with the current coronavirus because it's basically walk up, get your food and or get whatever you want and get out of there. And I actually like the idea that it's not integrated into the building and it's separate. And actually, even if it doesn't even look like the building, I like the example of the green container, you know, that doesn't really match the other colors per se. I think it is a set-alone element. So I just wanted to say is I like actually that aspect. That's
John,
it.
do you want to rebut that rebuttal?
Fair enough. We can disagree.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's fine. Eugene, do you have anything else you want to add?
Oh, no, I think that's it. I do also want to, I did forget, I agree with Commissioner Cass on that parking situation as well. I was silent on it, but I want to share my support to what he said at the very outset about parking. That's very unfortunate that third and fourth floors are not counted in. It's very unfortunate. That's it. Thank you.
All right, they won't drive cars, so it'll be all right. All right. Sarah, what are you looking for from us as far as, do we need a motion to continue this and that's all it is?
And
So I'm going to make
so
a
definitely
motion.
to date certain the 27th.
So I make a motion to continue this to address the comments that you were provided until May 27th.
Second.
Can I get a second? And
So, sorry, the May 27th, as in 2 weeks from today.
Correct. Is that not enough time, Claire?
Yeah, I'm hoping to get a little bit more time to get together with my team so that we can actually put some thought into making these changes and
Sure.
make
So
sure
that-
that they, yeah.
Next meeting would be June 10th.
I think that's probably more doable, but I need to, actually, I think we have another presentation that night. but does it have to be extended to a date certain as of this moment?
Why don't we extend it to the
Touch
10th and
base
you can
offline.
extend it after if needed.
Okay.
Is that acceptable, Sarah? Or did,
So if we don't extend it to a date certain,
no, I
then-
said to a date certain.
right? And let me just explain. So if we don't do it to a date certain, then I would have to renotice, which is okay. I can do that. If we continue it to a date, because this falls under the SB 330 laws,
Mhm.
if it shows up on an agenda, I believe that it may count as a meeting, and we have 5 meetings. So
Even if it's changed before we have the meeting?
I believe if it shows up on an agenda, I'm not positive. I can check with the city attorney, but that would be my cautious direction.
All right,
It was my
so,
understanding that the meetings only counted without actually having the meeting if it was continued based on indecision at a meeting, in that given meeting, not necessarily based on being noticed in an agenda, but that's my understanding.
are you,
But
okay, are
you
you
guys-
not going to be able to do the 10th? Is that what you're telling us?
I need to check with my,
Well, I don't want to waste a meeting. So Sarah,
Yeah.
how about if we say to a date not certain, and then it's just renoticed, because renoticing is what? Is it a posting or?
Yeah, mailing and posting 2 weeks before. Mhm.
oh, wait, actually, we can do the 10th.
Okay,
Great.
voila. So I make a motion to continue this
Sorry
To
about that,
address the-
thank you.
to a date certain of June 10th.
So moved. Second.
So that I'll
Second,
take that as a second. So I'm going to say aye, Glenn,
aye.
John,
Aye.
Eugene.
Aye.
All right, wonderful. We'll see you in 4 weeks, or
Thank
whatever that
you.
is.
Thank you, everybody.
All righty. All right, moving on. Other business, ARC volunteer for the 15th.
Yeah, got it.
All right.
Thanks, Glenn.
Hey,
Yeah.
Glenn is our resident ARC.
Glenn's the best. He's the best.
All right, commissioners report. Welcome, John. Hope you enjoyed your
Thank
first
you.
experience.
Glad to be here.
Yeah, welcome, John. Looking forward to working with you.
Well, you
Yes.
too, all of you.
Thank you.
Anybody have anything to report or anything of interest for the rest of us? No? All right. Well, if no one has anything, then this meeting is adjourned.
Thank
You
you.
guys have a good night.
Same to you.
Thank you.
Stay safe,
Thank you. Good
everyone.
night.
Stay safe, everyone. Bye.
Bye.
Good night.